Welcome to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm your host, Susie St. Angelo, and thanks for being here. Today's episode is called Finding Presence and Mindfulness Through Cooking, and my guest is Naina Bhedwar. Chef Naina comes from India, and she has lived in all four corners of India. She's lived in Australia, the UK, and she now calls Atlanta home. She teaches cooking classes, both Indian and Persian, and she has a mindfulness business called Feed Your Peace. She is very interesting and brings a real interesting perspective to the daily habits of cooking. It doesn't mean you have to be in the kitchen for a long time, but you can certainly take a few seconds to be present in the kitchen with what you're seeing, smelling, looking at, hearing. So I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. It was a lot of fun, and it brings to mind the importance of finding joy in cooking. So this podcast is for you if you know you want to change something. Maybe it's your career, your health, or another aspect of your life. And you might wonder if this is the right stage or age in life to make that change. And maybe you just don't know how to make that change. Or maybe you're caught in analysis paralysis. I understand and I see you because I used to be that way. But just keep listening, keep watching, and you'll take away one or two small steps that will make a big difference in your life. Thanks so much. And you can find this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, Amazon, and Apple platforms. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get into today's conversation and meet my guest, Chef Naina Bhedwar. Hi, Naina.
Hi, Susie.
How are you
Thank you so
today?
much for having me. Very well, and excited to speak to you.
Thank you. I'm so excited that you're on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I think the conversation will be very interesting and fun, and I'm looking forward to it. So why don't we start by you telling me a little bit about your background and how you got into cooking and to what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, well, I had a very long and meandering route, as do many people. Cooking is actually my third official career, although or maybe not career because the first one didn't really take off out of choice. I began in my early 20s, very wet behind the ears, as a therapist. Found that to be a little overwhelming, probably because of my lack of experience and age and things like that. And after doing that for barely a few months, I moved into working with dyslexic, autistic, and other special needs children. And I did that both in India and in the UK, where I lived for many years, for about 19 years. And I was very much burnt out by the end of that because I kind of tumbled into the career. It wasn't really a very conscious choice. And had been cooking all alongside. I've been cooking since I was probably 4 or 5 years old in some form or another. It's very, very common in India, where I spent the first 8 years of my life, to have household help. So my grandparents, who I used to spend my summers with, they had a cook who had been with them since he was 14 years old. When I came along, he was in his 30s. And he would pull up a little stool and have me stand next to him and tell me what to add into various bubbling pots. And my grandfather used to get very perturbed because young ladies were not supposed to be in the kitchen. They were supposed to be reading or sewing, or he was a bit of a snob. Let's just say, God bless him. So the cooking's been bubbling alongside, but the family that I come from, like I just explained, cooking for money or cooking for a living is not necessarily considered to be the most seemly of choices. So it bubbled along until finally it became too much. And life also gave me a nice segue. I moved from the UK to the US. I think it would have been different if I'd moved to other parts of the US where the kind of food that I cook is more prevalent. Having moved to Atlanta, 2012. The restaurant scene was nowhere near what it is now. I had to really go hunting for lots of ingredients. I had to still send for some things from India. It's a completely different scene now, completely different. And I spoke to a lady who ran a cooking school, one of the major cooking schools here, and she was so open and so trusting, and she just was ready to have me start cooking the following week without any of the box ticking or list filling or, all the stuff that I had to come up against in the UK when I was trying to get the business off the ground. It's like, have you done this? Have you done that? This is not good enough. That's not good enough. Whereas she was just like, oh, just come cook. I'm like, you really? It was such a sea change. Yeah, it really was. And the rest is kind of history. So as much as I moved to America kicking and screaming, I do have to say it's given me my business, which took me 36 years, but I got there. Yeah. Yes. So I started it off. I had my first clients within a couple of months of moving here. I had my LLC, my taxes, all that stuff sorted out. And I started doing cooking classes at this cooking school. And when I first started, I had a couple of jobs a month, and now I have 3 to 4 a week. So it's it's definitely picked up only in the last 2 years because I've stopped and started when I had kids. And that allowed me that's the wonderful thing about having your own business. It has lots of cons, but this is a huge pro that I have been able to be there for my kids and stop and start as desired. It's a massive boon. And yeah, so now they are 12 and 8 and, need me in a very different way. So I'm able to up the amount of clients I have. I cater also. It's not my most favorite thing to do. I do really, really love teaching. And then hopefully I'll be able to speak more about my new program, which brings teaching, cooking and mindfulness together, consciousness together, which is a new thing that I've been running for the last 2 years. And fingers crossed, I'll be able to move more in the direction of just teaching and just doing the coaching. But the catering requests come in, and honestly, I find it very hard to say no to people who love my food. So.
Well, that's the highest compliment other than imitation. So I would think, take the opportunities as they come if they work. But I could relate to your story about as a child pulling up the stool and watching, because I did the same thing, and that's where I loved it. And then my mom would say she wasn't a very good cook, but, she always had very well-balanced meals and certain comfort foods that all of us enjoy now, as I'm sure you have from India. And I think, that's kind of where we start to get our love of things and our memories is from our childhood. And sometimes the seed it is the blueprint. And I think the seed gets planted there and it blossoms later like it has for you. And so I'm just really excited, as a cooking instructor. How do you help, your students? I mean, how do you, I know you're obviously teaching them, I assume you're teaching them Indian cooking.
Indian and Persian. My background is the Indian community that I'm from originally came from Iran. So we have basically anything, if you draw a line between Persia and India on the map, I teach pretty much anything that's along that route.
Yeah. So, do beginners struggle more with techniques and the process, and do they want to rush through it, or do they take their time cooking? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I think actually the beginners, the whole concept of beginner's mind. I think I'm the one who tends to rush more, and I had a big event on Friday, and I think I had about 4 pots bubbling at the same time, and I burnt a set of onions to an absolute crisp. And I think it's just, and just like thinking that you can keep so many plates spinning in the air and things like that. So I think the beginner's mind, especially when I have to stop during a class, The classes that I teach at the Cook's Warehouse, which is the cooking school over here, sometimes they can get as large as 16, 18 people in the kitchen at the same time. And I have to have my eyes everywhere. But I have to say that, when I occasionally spot someone who needs a little bit of assistance in knife skills, and I ask them to put the knife down and I show them what to do, and then they pick it up and copy me. It's having to put the words to the action and coach them through that technique is really, really good for me, because it makes me stop and think. Like, I remember one time when I did it, was obviously quite early on, and I could almost hear my brain think, right, is it going forward and back? Because I was trying to teach him the rocking motion with the knife, because he was picking the knife up and putting it down, and picking it up and putting it down. And I was trying to show him that you don't have to pick it up and put it down each time, it's slide it through. So getting those prepositions in place and being able to really put the language behind the instruction can actually be somewhat challenging. And my technique has evolved hugely. I've been doing this. My first class here was actually before I even moved here. I was dating my husband long distance. He lived here. So when I came here to visit him, I did my first class in 2010. So it's been 16 years. And I look back at recipes that I had written then that I still have on my computer, and they're worded in such a clunky way. I tend to have an overly descriptive way of writing, and it's become tighter and neater and over the years, and just like, you only need what's absolutely necessary. All the flowery stuff you can save for later.
I took my first knife skill class just last month, and I enjoy cooking. And I wish I had taken it years and years ago, because some of the basics, and I'm sure you get people with all different cooking levels in your classes, that you can always teach someone something new. But I like to take cooking classes, and I like to take cooking classes in other countries too.
Yeah, that's so fun.
It is so fun.
So fun. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about, this your teaching process. Is there anything that resonates with you or has surprised you about being a teacher?
Well, I mean, I've because I taught kids for so many years before doing this. I have to say one of the things that really struck me and has stayed with me all of these years is in my earlier classes, and when I'm reminded of it now, it's a nice thing to be reminded of, that for so many years I taught recalcitrant children who didn't necessarily want to be where they were or listen to what I was saying. And it was a challenge to get them. And there were the occasional rewarding moments, of course, but to move from that to teaching adults who are paying their good money to sit there and listen to what I'm saying and asking me intelligent questions. I mean, it was like a high. It was unbelievable for me to go up to still be teaching, but to be doing it in such a richly an environment where the exchanges were so rich, and I was just getting so many questions, and not everybody was there for the technique. I mean, if you teach a knife skills class, people are there for the technique, but with my kind of classes, so many people are there just because they're curious about the spices. They're curious. They ask historical questions and geographical questions, and and I have to sometimes go home and do research, and it's lovely for me because it keeps me the further I've moved away from home, and the longer I've spent away from home, original home, the more I find myself turning back and wanting to, like you said, plant the seed. Now, it's been long enough now that I can see the roots, and I want them to be healthy, and I want them to be strong, both for myself as well as for my children. As an immigrant's kids, I want them to have. It's so easy to lose sight of who you are when you're not living in the country that you're from.
Oh, sure. And I would imagine that people are curious about your culture, and they want to know a lot about the spices, and so I'm sure it taps into parts of your life that have been long gone, and I'm sure that does help keep you back present and That's exciting. So people actually want catered. Do they want catered Indian food and Persian food? Is that what they're requesting? Okay.
So I have a party for 14 next weekend. Um, Most people tend to have restaurant menus in their heads, and I offer some really regional dishes and some really unusual things that you would never find on a restaurant menu. So I try to gently guide people in that direction so that they're not just asking for butter chicken and butter chicken.
Yeah, nice. I think that's wonderful that the person you were referencing who gave you the opportunity, kind of sight unseen, that's it's a little more rare these days. Without saying, let's see your resume or your credentials. So,
I even offered to bring her something. I offered to cook her a full meal and bring it to her, and she actually said, "No, it's fine," because I had come recommended through somebody who knew my husband, who ran the school, and that was enough for her. And I was like, "But you don't know that I can cook. Maybe I can't. I've tasted some really bad food in my time."
that's funny. What has cooking taught you about yourself?
Well, I think more along the lines of the whole cultural thing, just more deeply who I am, what I'm connected to, what matters. Um, and I think also the presence piece of it has shown me that I'm a hot-headed, impatient person, and that there is a lot of fodder here for me to work with that can kind of, I mean, not that the world is doing us any favors right now in terms of stress levels and things like that, but just where places that I need to work on. And
Well, that leads me to the next question, which is about self-care. And if cooking were a form of self-care, how would you define it?
oh, I think it's the word self care. I think also conjures up images of manicures and pedicures and not doing anything and just yeah. Lying in a hammock, and those are absolutely forms of self care. But I think it's uh, underestimated how the way to say it, kind of the quality of attention that you bring to what you're doing can be a form of self care. Because I think when we're up here and we're just on the hamster wheel and doing things in autopilot mode, whether it's, I think you can be lying in a salon chair having a manicure and a pedicure and still be stressed to your eyeballs, you know. But there's ways in which you can weave in a different quality of attention to what you're doing, and that can help to just ground you and change the way change the you that you bring to the everyday.
Yeah, it certainly does. What would you say to someone who sees cooking as a chore instead of as a gift or a way to be present?
Firstly, I would deeply empathize because there are many, many times during the day where I see it as a chore. I don't think it's just one way or another way. Again, it depends on what your mood is and who you are when you arrive at the counter or arrive at the stove. I think that informs the experience that follows after that. I know that I was emptying the dishwasher this morning rather loudly because nobody was helping me. Um, and I mean, I find the daily thinking about what to have for dinner for my family just as monotonous as most people. And it's when I, come across a Epicurious article about an unusual ingredient and suddenly run out to go get it and think, oh, what can I do with this? Then I come alive. So it's a bit of both. And I would definitely tell them to just make space give yourself a lot of grace. Make space for yourself. I think we make it all about the activity and we don't include ourselves. in the equation. And that's kind of where my cooking and mindfulness program comes in, because when you're saying that it's a chore, you're telling a story. And the only way to disengage from that is literally to stop telling the story. And stopping telling the story doesn't mean ignoring it or pushing it away, or, it's literally shifting your attention and bringing a different quality of attention to what you're doing. So you're still doing the exact same thing, but instead of telling the story of, oh, this is a chore and, it's a punishment and I shouldn't be here, I should be somewhere else, or imagining that you're somewhere else, be right where you are, and every couple of seconds, look at a pattern that has shown up on your cutting board, or listen to a sound, or, look at colors, feel textures, close your eyes for a second. And, if you happen to be making a dough for a flatbread or something like that, squeeze it and really get feedback from the activity.
Well, and I think, you've hit on things. I like cooking because it taps into one of my values, which is a love of learning, and I'm curious. And so if I have some leftover ingredients, I'll kind of either, if I don't play with them, I'll look up for maybe a recipe to see how I could use some leftover ingredients. But my next question leads into this new opportunity that you've created. So tell me and tell the listeners and viewers about that.
So I'm calling it Feed Your Peace, PEAC, and it's still relatively new. A lot of techniques have been out there for decades. It's only a couple of years, and it's nothing new in the sense that I've not invented anything. I've just kind of connected some dots in a slightly different way. There's a lot of research and a lot of information out there about mindfulness in other parts of food, of the food world, from farming to sustainable to getting it to your table to and then skipping over the cooking part and going straight to eating. But there's very little about the power of finding mindful moments while cooking. And to me, it seems like somebody just missed the train, mostly me for all this time, because I've been doing it for so many years, and I'm amazed that the dots didn't connect for me sooner. But timing is everything. It happens when it's going to happen. And just, I think, the way it's kind of come together for me is because I did a lot of sensory work with the children that I used to work with. And that was actually, even though as I progressed through the school that I worked in, my job became more and more admin and paper shuffling and talking to government agencies and stuff like that. And what I really loved to do was working one-on-one with the kids, and especially not just teaching them nouns and verbs and addition and subtraction, but watching their bodies and looking how they navigated the world through their neurodivergent lens. And it got me so excited one day when I had a really, really bad day. And the occupational therapist at the school took me down to the room where she worked with the kids, where there were swings and hammocks and rollers and, all these sorts of things that helped them. And she said, lie down. And I was like, almost hyperventilating. And the story was going around in my head that, oh, what am I doing here? And this is the worst thing I've ever done. And blah, 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 blah. And she laid me down. She put some soft cushions over my arms and my legs. And she took out one of those big, giant gym balls. And she just started putting her entire body weight behind it and rolling the ball up my legs, down my other leg, up my arm, down my other arm, and so on. Not my torso at all, but just my limbs. And then made me turn over, did the same thing again. And the whole process probably took about 3.5 minutes. And I got up like a completely different person. This was probably 24 years, something like that. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because the difference between how I had felt before and how I had felt after, just from that pressure, was so amazing. And of course, this was someone else doing it to me, but there are ways that you can harness that sensory input just from moment to moment. And it was, I think what also came to me was it's such a short period of time that resulted in such a huge change in the way I was feeling. And so the whole idea of sensory input and how we receive it, not just as a means to an end, which is how most of us receive sensory input. We look at something in order to understand it. We hear something in order to listen to it. We don't just hear, just look, just take the information in, and that's it. And let it pass through and carry on to the next thing that our eyes fall on, or the next sound that our ears hear, or the next texture that our hands happen to come into contact with. And to me, that's what going with the flow is. As soon as you have information that comes in and you hold on to it, you're not in the flow anymore. Going with the flow means letting it flow in and letting it flow out. And there are obviously times when you have to hold on to things. But I think what we end up doing is we end up holding on to everything. And we don't have this ability to move between different modes. And that's what mindfulness, to me, when mindfulness is practiced correctly, and if you're doing it in an everyday way, just, when you're doing other things, it becomes an ability to switch between modes so that we're not constantly in survival mode. We know how to switch out of that and how to come down. And then when we need to switch back in, we can. There are absolutely times when you must be in survival mode and when you must be online and going fast. But when you're online and going fast with everything, like you get super impatient with traffic and you get super impatient with your kids and you get super impatient because I've done it all. I've experienced it all. And now I'm seeing the difference when I take that few moments to just let things flow in and let things flow out and let my senses fall wherever they will. And the beauty of that is no two experiences can ever be the same within the same person as well as within.
So how can cooking still feel meditative on a stressful or rushed day? Because I listen to you and I think I'm seeing these people who are like, and they're so wound tight from probably a stressful day. And they're thinking about what's next after dinner and doing the laundry and getting the kids to bed or, whatever, or taking care of their parents or whatever. So.
No, I totally get it. And, I think it's a little of a reach at this point to say that it could be meditative when you are already wound up. I think it can definitely be meditative if you've chosen the dish and you're alone in the kitchen and you've got music on and, all that kind of thing, then it definitely can be. But yes, and you're quite intentional about it. But when you have less space for that, and it's a rushed evening and you're trying to get things done, then it's more just little moments. It's little intervals of calm that you just are what you're just constantly doing is you're reminding your nervous system that it doesn't need to be in that hamster wheel mode all the time. And that has to be an intentional thing that you do. So as I'm thinking about the pile of laundry upstairs and chopping the onions, I pause for a second and I notice the symmetry and the lines on the onion. Or I notice the contrast of the purple of the onion, of the outside of the onion with the white of the inside. Or I listen to the sound of the knife on the cutting board. Or there's a million things that you can notice. And it takes seconds. And just for that short amount of time, what you've done is you've just switched out of your default mode network, which is the chatterer, the wanderer, the needing to find meaning behind everything in your brain to the present conscious being that you truly are. And it's literally like coming online. And It doesn't require any fancy technique, any fancy skill. You don't have to go to any kind of school. You don't have to get any kind of degree. It's something that we all have built into us, and that I like to say, most people are very drawn to a young child walking around and just, taking in their world in this, present, sometimes language free when they're, very young kind of way. And it's literally like going back to that sense. And it's in there. It's just got so covered up with all the complexities of life.
Well, and I think that modern life has really dulled people's ability to probably be present in a lot of things they do, including the kitchen.
And I think also understanding how it benefits you is also so that it doesn't become one more thing that you do on autopilot. Right? Like understanding the actual neurology of it, and that what you're doing is you're switching networks in your brain. And that when you move out of the default mode network and you move into this other part of the brain, you're actually, if you could be plugged into some EEG machine or something, you would see your heart rate going down. You would see your breathing start to even. You would feel your body start to not be so this. Yeah. And what I tell people in my sessions is that unfortunately I can't do that for you. I hope one day I can. Have a home-based machine that I can plug people into when they're chopping and cutting. But yeah, if you follow this technique with intentionality, you will find almost 99% of the time that you will either yawn or take a deep breath within 3 or 4 seconds of switching out of and it happens with me every time. And it's not you don't have to stop and tell yourself, take a deep breath. Your body just does it automatically because you're sending signals that, okay, I'm switching out of that mode. I'm switching out of survive and I'm switching into thrive. And there's it's a pendulum. And I don't think we need to feel guilty or bad for being in, either way. It's just how our systems have learned to navigate life. But that doesn't mean that there isn't another way.
Yeah, well, I think there is. As I listen to you, I also think about today's world, and we've created all this fast food and hurry up, rush, and people were tending not to cook at home except during the pandemic. And now I think there's more people cooking at home, hopefully because things are more expensive to go out and eat. And truly, I don't look at it as quite the ordeal to cook. I never did, but I mean, you do get kind of bored. Everybody gets bored. They want to change, or they want to go out just for variety, or for social reasons or whatever, or something's a new restaurant, a new type of food, whatever. But I think it's important for people too to know that you can cook and get a healthy dinner on the table, and it doesn't have to be a long time. It doesn't have to take hours. You can get a meal on the table in 30 minutes.
Yeah. And God knows we have the gadgets and all the things nowadays that make everything so much faster and easier.
And those gadgets can also help to our meditative state too. It's the squeezing the lemon in the lemon squeezer holder, or it's the knife chopping, or it's the straining of the pasta, the drips.
Listening to the whir of the food processor. Even something like I have a glass of water here and I'm putting it down and I just listen to the clink sound. And I'm not trying to gain anything from it. I'm not trying to understand it. I'm not trying to have it add anything to my experience. It's just there. And the more and more and more that I have done this, the more I have found that in life, I'm able to let things just be. And I can also, when I feel my reaction coming up, I can let my reaction also just be. Instead of feeling like I have to do something, I have to respond, I have to say something, I have to, of course, because I'm in this, I have a psychology background and I'm, very keen on this side of things. So I listen to lots of podcasts and things like that. But there's so much that's being said these days about being able to sit with your discomfort. And, a lot of psychology podcasts and self-help podcasts talk about this. But I don't know that many people tell you how. How do you do this? Like, give me a 3-step map of how do I get to the point where I can feel comfortable enough to sit with my discomfort. And that is actually my eventual aim with this technique. But I've only worked with 2 people so far, and all 3 because I'm, trying to build the material and the research, that it eventually becomes like a somatic technique that you use on yourself. So you become so adept with your 5 external senses, which everybody knows about and everybody's familiar with, and you learn in grade school and all that sort of thing, that you then move towards your internal senses, which few people know about. One being your vestibular sense balance, second being your proprioceptive sense, which is your sense of your body in space, which is basically what is allowing me to talk to you right now without falling over. And third and most important, which is the interoceptive sense, which is inward and understanding and picking up on internal sensations. So, and there's so many things in language that point to this. Oh, I had a sinking feeling. My heart was racing. My palms were sweating. Butterflies in my stomach, lump in my throat. All of the different body sensations that are connected with various emotional states. And the interesting thing is that the 2 main parts of interoception, or the 2 main the 2 main things that it takes care of are hunger and thirst. And those are both intimately connected with food. So to be able to feel hungry, to be able to feel what that feels like internally is this, and then be able to act on it and go get yourself something to eat, or to be able to feel thirsty, take that signal to your brain, I'm thirsty, let me go get a drink of water or whatever, is exactly the same as your body telling you, I feel nervous, I feel excited, I feel grief, I feel happiness, I feel joy. The whole spectrum of emotions also have that same physical component, also send you that same physical message. And rather than flying into the story of why you're nervous or why you're excited or who's making you happy or who's making you sad, we go straight to that and we skip over the sensing. And that to me is what sitting with yourself is all about. Like, can you let that information come in, let it be there if it needs to be there, and let it leave when it needs to? Which, in effect, is meditation, yes. But how do we get to that point where we can actually do that? And I think that if we're not well versed enough with our sensory systems, you can't do that. Because then it's something that you want to push away. It's something that you want to understand, something that you want to label. It's something that you want to talk about, all of which is fine in certain, settings. But the thing that keeps getting skipped over, even in therapist office and classrooms and families and everywhere, is just how does that actually feel? How does it feel? And in my Feed Your Peace classes, I try to equip people with the language, because I think the first step is finding the language to name that feeling, to find that feeling. So when you're cooking, you're looking at patterns, you're looking at symmetry, you're looking at bubbling and sloshing and heaviness and lightness and patterns and brightness and, all sorts of things. Sounds, clinks and crackles and all of these words can help you to develop a vocabulary that then helps you when you go inside. Like I know that when I'm angry, it feels hot. It feels hot and crackly. It feels like it has angles. It doesn't feel smooth. It doesn't feel, it feels like a hard cube rolling around inside. And it's things like that even if you can do that, even if you can apply 3 or 4 words to how this thing feels, that then you can move from that to just letting it be there. And they've actually done experiments, mindfulness experiments, where it said that a human being needs to just let a sensation be for 7 seconds. 7 seconds with 0 interference. No talking about it, no trying to understand it, no, just letting it be there. And your nervous system starts to process it. Carry on. Oh, curious. I need people who are really curious and who are willing to be patient with themselves, and who are willing to practice. That's the biggest thing. And like with any other technique, or, whether you're trying to learn to play tennis or swim or, do a cartwheel, you have to practice. But the thing that I think makes it that much more approachable is that you don't have to take time out of your regular life to practice. This is something that weaves in with your life, and it can be done when you're making a cup of coffee at the office, and it can be done when you're, making a packet of ramen or a peanut butter jelly sandwich. You don't have to be making some fancy meal, because the entirety of our existence is sensory. If our senses were cut off, life would not be worth living. So it's almost, I find it to be almost a practice of gratitude in a way, because you're paying attention to yourself in a really soft, gentle, a way that has no agenda, no, voice in the back of your head going, be productive, get this done, tick one more thing off your list. You're just doing it. And, there are times when I can do it for 5-10 minutes, and I'm just like, oh. And there are times when I can do it for 4 or 5 seconds. And that's all I can do. But because I've understood that no matter how small an interval I'm doing it for, it's incremental. It builds. It's like a piggy bank that you're constantly feeding into. And there's a lovely quote that says, no amount of conscious effort ever goes unnoticed.
Well, I doubt my cooking experience will be the same after this conversation, honestly, because I think I think I'm always present because it's just me in the kitchen at this point. But
so you've got the perfect ground to do it for longer spells.
And the nice thing is I don't have a TV in my kitchen to have on as a distraction. I could put music on if I wanted to, but I don't. I don't have a lot of stimuli around me. I'm pretty focused. So, and even going out, like tonight, I'll probably go out and grill a piece of fish.
Yeah.
And that's a process too,
Yep. I mean, even just listening to the sound of it when it hits the hot grate, looking at the contrast between the black lines and the white fish, and just.
Okay, so what's your reset meal when you need to feel grounded? What do you like?
That's a tough one. I'm a true creative, and I just constantly keep turning that dial to see what else is coming up. But I think, in terms of a category, probably it would definitely be Indian food of some description. And for me, it's a texture thing. And this is, again, something else that has come out of my Feed Your Peace practice. I've discovered that I always thought I was a very visual person, but texture is super important to me. So it's almost definitely going to be something soft and almost bordering on baby food like. So, yeah. So we have a dish that I grew up on that's called khichdi, which is actually a big part of Ayurvedic cooking as well. And it's basically like a risotto, but it's not made with the risotto rice. It's made with, any other kind of medium grain rice. And it's either cooked long and slow on the stove or, to align with my impatience in the instant pot. And it comes out, really soothingly soft. And then you put all these, you make a spiced oil with onions and garlic, chilies, and you pour it over the top and kind of mix it through. And it's just a big bowl of comforting goodness.
Sounds it. And my mouth is watering. If you could design the perfect meditative cooking experience for someone, what would it include?
I think definitely not too much external noise, nice clean surfaces, because I think also the sensory thing comes through when you don't have too much other stuff pulling on your attention, and something with lots of aroma and lots of texture, and just again coming back to the feed your feast, just lots of things that feed those. So I would find out from them probably ahead of time whether they are more of a hands-on person, or do they appreciate aromas more or colors more, or what do they generally feel drawn to, and maybe choose recipes that are higher on those aspects.
Sure. What's one kitchen habit you swear by that most people overlook?
This is one that, despite the fact that I am not cooking school trained, this is one that I actually owe to my mother, which is cleaning up as you go along. My husband could leave dishes in the sink for days if I let him. And every 10 square inches of the counter has to be wiped down when I move something and, work on a different side or something like that. Even before we started this, I had 3 or 4 dishes in the sink. I was like,
So the basis for this podcast has always been around health, that our health is more than just diet and exercise, that it is our career, it's our finances, it's our home life, it's our home cooking, it's our home environment, it's our joy. And this sort of falls into line with a few of those, actually. But I would put this under the joy category, because I think joy is so important in a world that looks for negativity and consternation and conflict. And this feels comforting and brings joy to talk about food and cooking and how the process is meditative, and you just have to look for it. You just have to. It's there if you only look for it.
It's waiting for you. It's waiting for you. And what you have to do is just notice. Just notice. That's all. It's really that simple.
So, Chef, what is your SOS? What's 1 or 2 tips for the person who is listening or watching today that they can take with them and do, besides reaching out to you for either a cooking class or a meditative experience?
I think not to underestimate what cooking can offer in the little moments, in the little, even in the most mundane, even in the most, what seems like the most chore-like, there is a layer underneath that is waiting to be discovered. And it's so simple and no frills that's what we tend to jump over, because I think we live in a world that thrives on complexity and intellectualization of things, all of which is great, but it's also utterly exhausting to just be on all the time. And this is being on too, but it's being on in a way that just gets you to exhale. And don't underestimate how effective 30 seconds of presence in the kitchen, how much benefit that can bring you. And like I said, any kitchen, office kitchen, home kitchen, and anywhere.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Eventually, what I actually call the technique an invitation to a new way of being in the kitchen and beyond. Because I want people to know that it can start in the kitchen, because that is a really easy, ripe right place with so many opportunities. But you absolutely should take it beyond, and you should have your sensory systems receiving and noticing when you're stuck in traffic and when you're in a line at the post office and you're doing all the mundane everyday things that make us go, there's these little moments. Don't underestimate what these little moments.
As I mentioned at the beginning, my mom, although she would say she wasn't a very good cook, she was, and she really much preferred gardening. She found that to be very therapeutic, where other people find cooking therapeutic. And I think you can find things therapeutic in anything you do. But I mean,
you asked her probably for the same reasons, because the sensory aspect gets you to just this, and go into your body. And God knows all the body-based therapies today, which are, eventually linked back to things like Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga and things like that, all point to the same message. Get into your body and things will start to change.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I love using my hands, whether it's dough or
the nerve endings in your hands are just, it's absolutely insane the amount of information that comes in, but it's not an information that you have to understand or do anything with. You just have to receive it, and your body knows exactly what to do.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that we didn't talk about?
Oh, I could go on for weeks. But no, I think we did it, didn't just.
Well, I think we did too. I feel more relaxed since we started this. Just I was visualizing it too. I think there's a visual part of this for me that visualizes being in the kitchen and calmly doing things and noticing. So from that aspect, I appreciate it. Chef, how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in either cooking classes or feed your piece instruction?
Yeah, so I do a lot of virtual work as well. So, if there's anybody in your audience who doesn't live in Atlanta and would like to reach out to me anyway, I do lots of virtual classes, both just straight up cooking as well as feed your piece. I'm happy to say that it transmits through the screen just as effectively as it does in person. So my website would be the first port of call, which would be kesarkitchen, KESAR kitchen, KITCHEN, all one word.com. Kesar is the Sanskrit term for saffron, which is a spice that's used a great deal in both Indian and Persian cooking, and it's definitely something that I love to work. And then Instagram and Facebook as well, again, under the same name.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. It's been a joy, and it is a joy to be with you. And I know that if I'm coming through Atlanta, I'd love to stop and take a cooking class with you.
Please. I would love that. Thank you, Susie. Thank you for having me.
Well, friends, sadly, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for listening or watching SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. And thank you, Chef Naina, for your time today and for your passion in cooking and for sharing what your business and your cooking instructions can do for all of us who spend every day in the kitchen. This podcast is about all things that contribute to our health, not just diet and exercise. It's about finding joy. It's about our home environment. So hopefully you'll walk away with more tools in your toolbox and more resources to make the changes you wish to make. If you're enjoying this podcast and think someone else should be watching or listening to it, please share it. Until next time, take care, and I hope our paths cross again.